Hello and welcome to Research Methods. This is video 7. I am Balazode. In the previous, we have discussed about a research problem. We have seen a research gap. We have tried to see the example of a different research problem. And also we have seen the objective of a research. Today, we are going to see illustration on formulating a research problem. Formulating a research problem. Suppose you want to study the relationship between fertilities and mortality. This is our research title. The following diagram gives the whole spectrum of the steps involved in formulation of a research problem. Just have a look at it. The first step is identifying mortality and fertility rates. Step 2, divide those. Trends in fertility and mortality. First, you have to see trends. The second, determinants of fertility behavior. What determines the fertilities? We have to identify. Then, a relationship between fertility and mortalities. What is the relationship? Is that positive or negative relationship? Second, the other impact of healthcare on mortalities. What is the impact of healthcare on mortality rates? Then the impact of contraceptive infertility behavior. Those is subdivisions of or dissecting of the main title. The third step is select a relationship between fertilities and mortality. Raise question. The fourth. What happens to fertility when mortality decline? What is the time lag between the start of declining in mortality and the start of fertilities? What are the factors that contribute to the declining in fertilities? And Step 5. Formulation of the objectives. In formulating objective of the research, we have two types of objective as we know before. That is a general objective or main objective and a specific objective, which is very categorized. In general objective, as we said, we have to explain our title. So that's to explore the relationship between fertility and mortality. This is our general objective or main objective. The specific objective is to find out the extent of the decline in fertility in relation to the extent of the decline in mortalities. The second specific objective is to ascertain the time lag between declining in mortality and the declining in fertilities. The third is to identify the factors that affect changes in fertility. Step number 6, make sure assess the objectives in the light of the works involved, the time available to you. You have to consider your time, the financial resource at your disposal. You have to consider your time or two, as well as your financial resource you have, and also other material that need for conducting of your research, technical expertise in the area. If there is no technical expertise, you cannot undertake your research properly. Number 7, or step number 7, double check. You have to check everything all the time. In research, you have to write, write, and also rewrite or double checking. That you are really interested in the study, that you have adequate resource, that you agree with the objectives, that you have the technical expertise to understudy the studies, understand the study. Then this is how we can formulate our research, uh, and that we have to consider when we're conducting a research. The second one is a research hypothesis. What is a research hypothesis? What do you know about hypothesis? The definition of hypothesis. Another important considerations in the formulation of a research problem is construction of the hypothesis. Hypotheses bring clarities, specificities, and a focus to the research problem, but are not essential for the studies. You can conduct a valid investigation without constructing a single formal hypothesis. On the other hand, within the context of a research study, you can construct as many hypotheses as you consider to be appropriate for you. Some believe that one must formulate hypotheses to undertake an investigation. However, many do not hold this opinion. That is necessary or not. That is depending on your research title, or that depending on your interest. Hypotheses primarily arise from a set of guesses that are tested through study, and one can conduct perfectly valid study without having these guesses or speculations. However, to narrow the field of investigation, it is important to formulate the hypothesis. The importance of hypotheses lies in their ability to bring direction, specificities, and a focus to a research study. In other words, hypotheses are clarities, specificities, and a focus to a research study. They tell us, or they tell a researcher what specific information to collect, and thereby providing greater focus. Questions. What is hypothesis then? Hypothesis is the guess, assumption, proposition, speculation, or ideas about situation, or about events or phenomena, or a relationship, the reality or truth of which you don't know before. That is what we call as hypothesis. Let me give you simple example for hypothesis. For example, while you are conducting a research. For example, if you take one title, the impact of inflation on economic performance of the country, or on GDP, or the impact of inflation on individual income. This is our title. We can say that, or we can take hypothesis by saying um, if theory says if inflation increase, the income of an individual decrease. That means if there is high inflation, the income is decreased. If such theory is there, this is the theory. On our hypothesis, we have two types of hypothesis, that is null hypothesis or H0, and the second one is H1 or alternative hypothesis, or sometimes called that is a researcher's hypothesis. On alternative hypothesis, we can put our own assumption. On null hypothesis, we can put a theory's hypothesis. So we have said if inflation increase, the income of an individual decrease. So inflation is on null hypothesis, we can put inflation is negatively affects individuals' income. This is null hypothesis. On alternative hypothesis or H1, we can say that inflation is positively affects the income of an individual. All the time, the alternative hypothesis and the null hypothesis are opposites. If you say on null hypothesis that it is negatively related with some variable, you have to say for alternative hypothesis it has positive related with some variable. All the time our hypothesis is this one. Then we can check by investigating or by analyzing or by taking a data and by testing we can approve whether it is a researcher's assumption or theory's assumption. This is what we call as hypothesis in simple ways. Then under the question, what is hypothesis then? Hypothesis is the guess, assumption, proposition, speculation, or an idea about situation, phenomena, or relationship, the reality or truth of which you don't know before. A researcher calls these assumptions, statements, or guesses hypotheses, and they became the basis of analysis or investigation. In most studies, the hypothesis will be based upon either previous studies or on your own or someone else's observation. Example, suppose you have guessed that there are more smokers than non-smokers in a given class. Suppose you have a guess that are more smokers than non-smokers in a given class. To test your guess, you ask either all or just some of this class if they are smokers. You can then conclude whether your guess was right or wrong. As a researcher, you don't know about the phenomena or a situation, the prevalence of a condition in population, or about the outcome of the program, but you do have a guess to form the basis of certain or guess. You test this by collecting information that will enable you to conclude if your hunch or guess was right. The verification process can have one of the three outcomes. Your guess may prove to be right or partially right or wrong. Without this process of verification, you cannot conclude anything about the validity of your assumption. This is how a hypothesis helps. Some more definition of hypothesis. Hypothesis is a general statement of the relationship between two or more variables, according to these guys. Hypothesis is written in such a way that it can be proven or disproven by valid and reliable data. It is in order to obtain this data that we perform our studies. In short, hypothesis is tentative statement about something, the validity of which usually unknown. The characteristics of the hypothesis. There are a number of considerations to keep in mind when constructing hypotheses, as they are important for the valid verification. The first one is hypothesis should be simple, specific, and conceptually clear, otherwise it is difficult to test. There is no place for ambiguity in construction of hypothesis, as ambiguity will make the verification of your hypothesis almost impossible. It should be unidimensional, that is, it should test only one relationship or guess at a time. To be able to develop a good hypothesis, you must be familiar with subject area. The literature review is of immense help, or it helps more. The more insight you have into problem, the easier it is to construct hypotheses. The average age of the male students in this class is higher than that of the female students. This hypothesis is clear, specific, and easy to test. It tells you what you are trying to compare. That means average age of this class, which population groups are being compared, female and male students, and what you want to establish or higher average age of the male students. Example 2. Suicide rates vary inversely with social cohesion or social integration, social coordination. This hypothesis is clear and specific, but a lot more difficult to test. As we said, hypothesis should be testable, otherwise it is difficult to use. There are three aspects of this hypothesis, or three features. Suicide rates vary inversely, which establishes the direction of relationship and the social cohesion. To find out the suicide rates and to establish whether a relationship is inverse or otherwise are comparatively easy, but to ascertain social cohesion is a lot more difficult. What determines social cohesion? How can it be measured? This problem makes it more difficult to test this hypothesis. Hypothesis should be capable of verification. That means it should be testable. Methods and the techniques must be available for data collection and analysis. There is no point in formulating a hypothesis if it cannot be subjected to verification because there are no technique to verify it, unless otherwise it shall be verified first. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that you should not formulate a hypothesis for which there are no methods for verification. You may, in the process of doing your research, develop new technique to verify it. You can do, but you have, first of all, it should be verified. Third, hypothesis should be related to the existing body of knowledge. It is important that your hypothesis emerges from the existing body of knowledge and that it adds to it, as this is an important function of the research. This can only be achieved if the hypothesis has its roots in the existing body of knowledge. A good hypothesis should also be in agreement with observed facts. A good hypothesis does not conflict with any law of nature, which is known to be true. Number 4, hypothesis should be operationalizable or measurable. This means that it can be expressed in terms that can be measured, otherwise it is not possible to use. If it cannot be measured, it cannot be tested, and hence no conclusion can be drawn. A hypothesis have to be related to the research problem, the research questions, and the research objective in one way or another way. With this, I come to the end of today's program, and I thank you for your views. Please, if you like, subscribe to my YouTube and share comments. youtube.com at Balai 1986. Okay? Have a nice time.